We're being recorded. Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Patchstack Helpers. Patchstack Helpers is an ongoing series of interviews highlighting people involved in open source, web application development, security research, design, performance, and much more. Generally speaking, Patchstack Helpers is going to feature individuals who help others in open source web communities. Many helpers out there have great stories to share, and many of those stories go untold. So we want to share these stories not to help the hubris of our guests, but to help spread the word that there are many helpers out there in the world. If you're just joining the live stream, thank you for joining, and please feel free to chime in on chat. You can say hi, mention where you work or where you're from. Please feel free to ask any questions you would like during the interview, or leave a comment if you have something to add to the conversation, and we'll do our best to take a break to acknowledge and share your thoughts. Today, I'm honored to have as my guest, Kathy Zant. Hello, Kathy. How are you?
Hi, Robert. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no problem at all. Could you do me a favor and give a quick bio or an introduction to for yourself for our guests?
Sure. Well, my name is Kathy Zant. I currently am the product marketing manager for Kadence. Kadence is a suite of plugins that, well, I'll just give my spiel. It changed my relationship with Gutenberg. Kadence is a pretty unique set of blocks and other plugins that really supercharge and create better performance for WordPress sites. And I'm pretty excited to be there.
Nice. Awesome. And you have a long history, though, working in WordPress as well as part of the community as well. You've been to multiple WordCamps and other events and conferences, and you've spoken at those as well. I think you have a long and distinguished history of speaking. I think there's how many talks do you think you've done in the last, few years?
More than when I could count on one hand.
Right.
Probably, I don't know, probably maybe 10 to 20-ish that I've done over the course of, a few years. Well, pre-COVID. And then, since the whole lockdown situation has occurred, I've done a lot of live streams. Page Builder Summit, I did a tutorial there. Have done a ton of online types of things too. So staying engaged with the community worldwide since everybody's camped out at home. So just trying to keep everybody involved and moving things forward.
That is cool. Yeah, we may have to talk about how things changed and how things changing again. And so there's really no control, but yet you've still strived and pushed to continue to share your knowledge with others through a pandemic, through being stuck at home, through many struggles and difficulties. Do you want to talk about maybe some key things? I know we have a similar background where I think for a while we were both cleaning up hacked websites, hacked WordPress and other open source technology websites. Do you want to maybe get into talking about that, or maybe some of your presentations?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've been working with WordPress for a really long time, just kind of, like Rob's here to heckle, Rob Carnes is here to heckle. Hi, Rob. That's good. So I've been working with WordPress forever. I was a developer developing websites, data-driven sites. I was back in the Microsoft days using active server pages. And so I was very much into web development before WordPress even kind of took off. But when WordPress took off, or when WordPress started, I was blogging, using movable type and things like that. And WordPress used the same database class that I was using in my personal projects that I was doing with PHP and MySQL. So I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll switch my blog over here because it's doing the same thing. And I'd tear apart core and put it back together. So I was using WordPress all the time, knew WordPress pretty well. And I started cleaning hack sites kind of on the side. I was homeschooling my daughter. And so I didn't really want a full-time job. I was supporting my husband with his business. And I just wanted to kind of get back into, and security's always kind of been baked into everything that I did. It wasn't like I was security professional. It was like security was just, something I was always aware of. And so I started just cleaning up hack sites on the side, just to kind of and re-engage my mind and to do something different rather than, third grade math all the time. And it was kind of funny because I'd sit there with my daughter, she'd do math, and every once in a while I'd say, hey, you want to play a game? It's called Malware, Not Malware. And so I would show her, and it's just pattern recognition, right? So I could show her a line of PHP code and then some obfuscated malware, and she would be able to recognize what malware looked like. And so I kind of worked that into homeschool curriculum. And then I wanted to start getting more engaged with people in the WordPress community. And so I pitched a talk and it got accepted. The very first one I pitched, it was about evaluating plugins. I had a great time at that event. And then I moved to Phoenix. And I'm like, well, I have to be here for a reason because it's 118 outside. So it has to be another reason besides the weather. And I decided to get involved with WordCamp Phoenix and some meetups there. And I fell in love with the people in the Phoenix area. Brandy Lawson, who ran a meetup in the North Phoenix area. She's just an amazing human and one of my favorite people on the planet. The WordCamp team in Phoenix was amazing. And so I'm repping Phoenix, even though I'm in Dallas right now. I'm repping Phoenix with my t-shirt because that experience of being able to not only like share my knowledge, but also share my organizational abilities to help put on events and help connect people, that was really empowering and something I'm hoping to get back to doing soon.
Nice. So was Phoenix the first place that you spoke at a WordCamp, or was that just the first place you helped organize?
First place I organized was in Phoenix, but the first place I spoke was in Sacramento. And I was living in Northern California at the time, and I had to go down to Sacramento for something. And there was a meetup that night. So I'm like, oh, well, I'm just going to go pop my head in and say hi and see who's here. So I got to meet Jennifer and Brian Bourne, and they were extremely welcoming. And so, you know, I don't know if it was because I popped my head in that they like, oh, well, we remember her. And that's why I got selected. But yeah, that was the first place I spoke. And it was like the first time I had been in front of an audience in forever. I was so nervous. Yeah, it was. I'm not nervous anymore. I'll talk to anybody.
That's great. Let's go. How you got introduced and progressed to speak at a WordCamp is a great story. Right? It's a great way to do it. The fact that it was local, I think that's I think that's forgotten a lot with WordCamps, that these are local events kind of meant for the local group, right? So if you wanted to speak at a WordCamp, the best thing you could do is go to your local, there's probably a meetup, right? There's no big push for, you don't have to present or have a call for paper ready or having anything to talk about, but go to that group. And that's the same people that are going to be at the WordCamp. And possibly, I think in your example, that's the same people that organize the WordCamp. So you were to be able to meet the right people, and you had a prior experience, which I think we should mention real quick so that, you're not hiding anything, but you have prior speaking experience. But then you just, that was your way to reapproach something that you knew how to do. And then you're able to share knowledge. And what that one was about auditing plugins or reviewing plugins?
Right. Yeah. Like how to evaluate a plugin. Like when you're starting a new project, there's 50,000 plus plugins in the repo. How do you know which blocks plugin to use? How do you know which events plugins to use? There's multiple plugins that do the exact same thing. How do you know what's the right one to choose for your product? What are some of the parameters or some of the data points that you can collect? And security was a big part of that, of course, right? How do you research the security history of a plugin? What kind of security databases exist, and where can you find those, like the Patchstack database, and being able to go and see if this plugin has had security incidents, and not saying that if a plugin has a security incident, that means that, that there's a problem with it, but how did that developer handle it? How did they handle the communication around that? How do they handle updates? Is it being supported well? Those types of things, and being able to evaluate those parameters was kind of the gist of what I spoke about. So, and another thing about speaking is just kind of like understanding who the audience is there. And you don't even have to be an expert at all things WordPress. You can have a really great experience with a social media experience. Something went viral for you. Talk about that experience. Everybody's got something to share. You don't have to have a level of expertise in order to speak at a WordCamp. If you have a story that can inspire someone, that can educate someone, that can kind of empower someone to know that something is possible that they've never thought was possible before, all of those types of things are great stories for WordCamps. And WordCamp organizing, being as a part of organizing 3 different WordCamps, including WordCamp US, I know on the speaker selection committee, they're looking for new, fresh faces and new stories. They're looking for voices that haven't been represented before, or voices that are underrepresented. So no matter who you are, it's a level playing field. You have a story to tell. Somebody's going to want to allow you to tell that story.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to encourage people to share their stories. Even if you think it's the most basic stuff, right? Like, no, so there's a common fallacy where you think, well, I learned this, anybody could learn it, right? But to do like a 30-minute lightning talk, maybe just 10, 15 minutes, but to do like a 30, 45-minute or a 60-minute talk to go over what you mentioned, just even your own story about how you encountered a problem, how you got over that problem, that 1 hour time slot could save somebody the next time that they're encountering that same problem, because they won't have to figure it all out from scratch. I'm sure they could, but remembering that you heard somebody talking about this, in the past, in your case, reviewing what makes the best plugins for a project, and many of your other presentations really just helps out, because anybody at any point in time, the fact that they end up on WordPress TV or online and other venues, anybody could always look up these resources and have a quick crash course, or at least know somebody's been there before and they've gotten out of it and they've gotten past it and they fixed this same problem, no matter how big or small. Are there any other talks that you gave in the last, pre-COVID or recently that you really liked and wanted to highlight a little bit here? Or
I really my passion talk was the one I did at WordCamp US, the one in St. Louis. I think it was 2019, right before the last WordCamp US. I did the hacker mindset. And in it, I talk about security and some general security practices and some of my horror stories, like cleaning up the 30-site cPanel. Those types of things where, there obviously I've had a lot of experiences doing that, but sharing those kinds of stories as kind of cautionary tales, but also kind of like demystifying or, a lot of people look at hackers and say, oh, that's a hacker, and they think it's a bad thing. And I want people to look at hackers and think, ooh, what are they up to? Because there's a whole creative component that I think you've seen a lot too in your work, is like hackers can be really creative. And so there's a mindset of creativity that's almost childlike in its, I wonder if I could do this type of thing, that I think is fascinating. And I would like to sort of take the stigma off of that and embrace it more, because I think that a lot of the greatest innovations that we've had have come from hackers. I mean, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, before there were computers, they were phone freaking, they were getting free phone calls. And, I saw some interview with Steve Wozniak that he liked to get phone numbers that had similar numbers, like, 222, 222, because little kids would call. He is just such a big kid. But he's got that playful mindset that doesn't look at restriction in the same way, like, or doing the things that you're supposed to do. And so that hacker mindset is very childlike, very creative. And that's where I think the greatest innovations come from. So I think as a culture as a whole, I would like to see that embraced more.
Oh yeah, I strongly agree. I have the hardest time trying to explain what feels so good about doing what would most people call hacking, not the malicious hacking, but really hacking in the sense of taking a thing, understanding how it's supposed to work, and then making it work in a way completely unexpected. That's what, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were doing when they were doing phone freakings. They were interfacing with how the phone system's working. We were able to get free phone calls. They were learning how the systems work and using some pre-recorded sounds to make the sounds of coins entering the system for payphones and things like that. Back when there were payphones. I'm now dating myself, but yeah, and I mean that was the system. That was how the system worked at the time. You put coins in to a payphone, and you could pick up the handset and dial a number. But they were like, well, we figured out we can just do these pre-recorded things, and it makes it sound like we're entering money, or the 2600 tone, which was made famous by somebody else. And I believe Steve Wozniak developed or built. I forgot what they're called, red boxes, blue boxes. Anyways, we're getting into some hacker history here where there's all sorts of various colored boxes, which don't even work anymore.
Did you ever see the thing where there's like that Captain Crunch whistle? It was in like the bottom of a Captain Crunch box, and it made a perfect 2600 tone. So you can get.
Yeah, it was a kid's cereal toy. Could make the perfect tone to be able to trigger the phone system to, I think it was like a hang up signal or something like that, and just basically made it so you can dial anybody for free.
Yeah.
Their security was knowledge of a tone. a hertz, a specific sound. And once that sound knowledge got out, there was basically nothing anybody could do to prevent it because there was no security mechanisms built into their design. In the 90s, I think towards the end of the 90s, when, of course, I was reading online how to do these things, and I kind of built the systems to try to fake it. And none of it worked by then. But so I missed out on my opportunity there. But it was still quite, I think it's a fascinating story, not in the sense of people got free calls, but in the sense of attack and defense. Right. The systems were designed and they were negligent in cases of security, or, well, this is not quite security. This would be, it's not integrity. It's not availability. It doesn't really fit into the security triads, but it is, I mean, I guess it's free service. So people were tricking things into giving them free service. But anyways, let's move on back to some other talking points. I mentioned earlier that you have experience speaking. Did you want to get into like what that experience was? Basically, like where did you first learn to speak, and what lessons could you share from that?
Okay, well, so when I was 11, I was raised Catholic. And when I was in 5th grade, my parents decided to send me to Catholic school. I've been in therapy about it. But they wanted somebody to like lecture at the daily masses. And it was like everybody that was there, it was like all these old people going to like daily mass. And I couldn't pronounce half the things in the Bible at the time, so the priest would sit there and like teach me how to pronounce everything. And I'd memorize it to the point where I could get out there and do it. So I would do that before school. Like the church was right next to the school. So I started doing that. And I guess I was the only kid that ever had done that. So they started having me do Sunday stuff. And one of my high school teachers was there, and he's like, you need to be on the debate team. Like, okay, well, you talk really fast and debaters talk really fast. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll go do debate. So I did debate.
I was wondering where the connection was, like church to debate. Like you go to a very interesting church.
Yeah, it was, well, just like the Catholic Church, you know, I
was hoping it was the one that had the debate section every morning where they kind of argue the existence or not. Like they're very open to.
Why is the Book of Enoch not in here? That's what I want to know. I never got to do any of that. By the time I was in high school, I got on the debate team, and so I was doing debate, and then I was going to go to college, like 4-year school, but my parents were going through a divorce, and so I went to a junior college, and one of my friends said, get involved in all the extracurricular activities that are interesting to you, because a company is going to hire you based on those things more than what you do in school. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna. So I did speech, I did student government and student newspaper. I was at school all the time. And then speech, I got recruited to go to a 4-year university, pretty much all expenses paid for being on the speech team. So I went to Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois, which was, they still, to this day, their speech program is ridiculously good. Like, if you want to look at like college programs that have championship, it's not the basketball, it's not football, it's the speech program at Bradley University. So I was kind of a part of some history there. So I was on the speech team there. But then after college, I was like, who's going to listen to a 22-year-old kid talk about anything? So I was like, okay, well, my parents were entrepreneurs, and I had never been in a big business, so I wanted to see what big businesses were like. Moved to Chicago, worked for big businesses, and said, this kind of stinks. Ended up starting my own businesses, and when the internet was starting to kick off, and I was getting on to BBS and all of those fun things, and just talking to people from all over the place, I was like, this is fun. And so then I got into coding and everything, and then stopped speaking altogether. And it wasn't until I got on that stage in Sacramento that I started speaking again. So there was a huge gap from being, a lector at church to doing WordCamp talks, but it came back pretty naturally. And now I get to talk about things that are more fun than, I don't know, this is the gospel according to So,
well, we could start the gospel according to WordPress or some such.
The gospel according to security, WordPress security. We could do that.
WordPress security gospel. But because I mean, perhaps the world needs it, right? They need more people just preaching the good word about security. And you've already touched on one of the points that I feel like I kind of preach about, which is that security in a plugin, having a security release is not a bad thing, right? That shows positive, that shows that like they approach security seriously. They patched an issue and they moved on. There's some hidden stuff that you don't get to see, which is it looks the worst. It's when there's a security patch, but no discussion.
Right.
When the change logs, when the developer, they feel that, possibly, ego gets hurt, or like they just feel like they don't want to expose that they wrote a security bug, even though they write bugs, all other sorts of bugs, right? Their change logs full of bug fixes.
Right.
Every piece of code is full of bug fixes. And some of those bugs are going to be security bugs. So sharing that information with the user, the eventual users of the plugin is critical. In my opinion, really, it is highly important. And that's why things like public databases, so you can look up if a plugin is secure or insecure. A lot of people don't like them because they feel attacked, or they feel like it's just pointing out the worst, really the worst day for a plugin developer, or the worst experience, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is it keeps everybody kind of honest,
Yeah. I've seen a lot of security bugs, both 0 days, things that were disclosed publicly before they were patched, as well as things that were patched and then disclosed. And I've seen breaches, and I've seen terrible breaches. I've seen a lot of things in security, and I can tell you the undercurrent of every single security incident that has gone well has all boiled down to how it is communicated. How it is communicated to end users, how it's communicated to the press, how it's communicated within an organization. It all boils down to communication. Because you've got like the incident response people who are like busy, like going through the forensic data, trying to figure out what happened, what's changed, all of that. And then how that information is then communicated to the stakeholders who need to know about it. I think the most important part of security is communication. And so if you are a WordPress developer and you have a plugin and it's got a vulnerability, how you communicate to that user, your user base, whether in your change log or sending out an email about it and kind of like giving some background of what's been fixed and how it was found, all of that information is critically important. It's going to make the difference between establishing greater trust with your users or violating that trust. In software, to me, it's all about trust, because your end users are basically inviting your code into their digital home on the web, right?
Yeah, that is true.
So it's all
they're
about
the ones
trust.
paying. They're the ones paying for the hosting provider. They're the ones paying for all the resources, and they run the plugin or themes code, that open source components code, on their environment. And I really do like, you did a great example. The two options, right, is it's either increasing trust or destroying trust. And the biggest difference there is communication. If they do communicate that there's a security issue and they make it clear, that's really all the plugin, that's all that any developer needs to do. And that's what all the big developers do, all the big shops. Microsoft has official announcements. Oracle, huge company, they have their own way to track CVEs and vulnerabilities in their products. WordPress core itself has a whole security team. They've got a bug bounty program handled through HackerOne. They've got everything you need. Like, it's all public. They're very clear about their security releases too. And what I like to, a little side note on what I like about that, is that they're very specific about security releases. Their security releases are not, I had all this feature release ready to go, and here's a security patch as well as a bunch of new features. WordPress core does not do that. WordPress core keeps their security and maintenance releases. Basically, they tend to happen after major releases, and they're related to that major release, and they patch it for all of their customers. And just to tout a little bit more, for those that don't know, the official version of WordPress that's supported is only the most recent one. But unofficially, the security team at WordPress.org does backports to all of the prior releases. I think back to 3.7. That may not be true forever, but that's like, I forgot. I think I looked up how many years. It's probably close to a decade of backport unofficial support.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, it's quite amazing. It's a great way to see how really it's done right. And WordPress has definitely turned around a lot. I don't think there was ever a huge problem with security, but I found that the project for WordPress security has just improved more and more, especially with good leadership and direction from the WordPress security team. We've seen a lot of hacked sites, and we've talked about, the developer's worst day is when a security bug is found, but the user's worst day is when their site gets hacked. So what would you say is like the top causes for WordPress sites to get hacked?
The user, the site owner. It's the site owner. Everything basically comes down to human bad password choices, not maintaining the site appropriately, making sure that updates are happening. Really, I think WordPress security is an education issue more than it is a code issue, because the plugins team is doing a great job. Developers, I feel honestly, from the time I started cleaning hack sites years ago to now, WordPress is more secure than ever. I think WordPress is what WordPress is as secure as it's ever going to be, because, and it's not necessarily because of the code. This isn't a code issue. This is a management and communication issue, and all of those types of procedures and policies and the way things have been done is ensuring that sites are more, the code base is more and more secure all the time. Following, I know security researchers, what they'll do is they'll go find, oh, well, everybody's not protecting their Ajax points or whatever. And so then they'll start looking for other plugins that aren't protecting it, because if one person's not doing it, then it's probably a system problem where people aren't coding, or the is admin function, misusing using that a lot. Whereas, and for background, is admin is a function that basically says, is this an admin page? It's not asking, is this an admin user? Yeah. But some plugins have used that as, is this an admin user, and use that for authentication rather than testing if something's on WP admin on the back end or not. And so, if one person's confused by it, a lot of people are. And so security research will look, go through the code, and they're searchable. It's a wpdirectory.net where you can go just search for functions and see what plugins are in the repo that are doing these types of things. All of these types of tools and all of these procedures and the responsible disclosure from security researchers, especially like the ones that you guys are supporting at Patchstack with the Red Team initiative, I think that's just so awesome that you're supporting all of these security researchers. This is making WordPress more and more secure. So as of 2022, the biggest problem with WordPress security is site owners who aren't updating, site owners who are not choosing very strong passwords or reusing passwords, site owners who are putting 10 sites in a cPanel, site owners who
on the same user,
on the same server-based user. Yeah, exactly. Those types of things are the problem. That's how sites get hacked. It's just from not following basic security procedures, because a lot of the attacks that I've seen over the years have been fairly rudimentary. Has that been your experience too? That, like, lots of brute force and a lot of, oh, let's look at this plugin vulnerability from 10 years ago. Like, why are you even trying to get in on this? Is anybody still running that yellow pencil vulnerability? Yeah. So it's I think it's just end users just need more education. So WordPress security, if it's a problem, it's an education and communication problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, WordPress is so powerful. It allows you to do the wrong thing, I think, is really what the problem. People will set up a site and it'll work great, and they don't need the knowledge, like the technical knowledge, the historical knowledge of like, hey, you needed to choose a good password, right? Like, because it'll set. Now there is that password. They added that feature. I've forgotten which version, the password strength meter, which is a great feature. I think that probably is a very quiet thing to see, that it probably prevented a lot of insecure passwords from being chosen in the first place. Or at least the project has done the best they can do to communicate you're using a bad password, and that might be all it needs to do, right? It's done its job. And also, that simple fact that, using a plugin that is out of date, not doing maintenance on the website, not updating the website, not staying up to date with the news. I'm sure there are so many sites that get hacked because they're using a theme or a plugin or an add-on, and there's a vulnerability in it, and they just don't know they need to update.
Right.
The update cadence.
Or even educating people that, just because you've deactivated a plugin doesn't mean that it's safe now, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of plugins just because the code is still on your server, and
Yep.
with it still being on your server, PHP can still run. Even though it's not active in WordPress, that vulnerability could conceivably, in many cases, can be still exploited. So deactivated and deleting plugins that you're not using on a regular basis. I think that file manager plugin was like that, right? You could deactivate it, but the vulnerability was still resident.
There's a handful. My favorite one to point out is Tim Thumb. I believe Tim Thumb was a
Yeah.
PHP file that allowed file uploads. Like
Yeah.
it did its job. That PHP file did exactly what it was programmed to do. Unfortunately, it had no authentication or no authorization checks. It was here to upload files, and it certainly did.
Yeah.
So it's just unfortunate that, and people just needed to know, hey, if your theme uses this specific library, like you need to get rid of that library, replace it, or update your theme. Chances are, and that was a hard one too, because it was so many different themes were affected.
Right.
So each one of those theme developers or designers really suddenly had to have a crash course in security to go in and apply a security patch, and that just was a big mess for many years, I believe.
Yeah. First site I ever cleaned was one of my husband's sites, and it was the Tim Thumb thing. And it was a mess. That was a tough one. And it was so many years ago. And I didn't have any, it was like, all right, I'm just rebuilding it, just rebuilding it from scratch. I don't even know what's messed up here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think your husband is so lucky to have you in that sense, because you were able to come in and help him out with his website.
Yeah.
But for people that don't have, a significant other who's there to help them, who do you think security's responsibility may fall on? Who could people look towards if they're kind of hearing a lot of this and thinking to themselves, like, I'm not sure if I've checked my passwords or checked my security or the security of my plugins on my website or the open source tools I use. Who would you say they should be looking towards?
Well, I hate saying that somebody else's, it's everyone's responsibility. If you own a WordPress site, just as if you have a bank account, security of that rests in your hands. You could blame the bank, you can blame your hosting provider, you can blame whoever, but ultimately, if you have an asset, the protection of that asset is your responsibility. And you can farm out cleaning it up. You can farm out to your hosting provider to clean it up, or I think there's like 10,000 people on Fiverr who do it.
Yeah.
There's so many different cleanup services these days. It's kind of crazy. But ultimately, I kind of liken it to like driving a car. Things go wrong with cars, right? You have to do maintenance on your car. You got to get the oil changed. If you don't understand the basic mechanics of how a car works, you're going to run into problems. If you never change your oil, you're going to run into problems. If you don't make sure your tires are safe, you're going to have problems. If you own a car, there are things that you're just going to have. I don't want to have to deal with. I miss my husband doing that stuff for me. But I have to be responsible for things that I don't necessarily want to do. I got to maintain my car. I got to deal with his car now. So it's basic knowledge of passwords. If you have an asset of a WordPress site, basic security for that site is, well, all of the security is your responsibility, but at least knowing where you're going to go, having an incident response plan in place that if, God forbid something happens, what will you do? Do you have backups? Do you have a hosting provider that's going to support you? Do you have a plan? What are you going to do if your website is shut down and you're making $10,000 a week on your website and now all of your income is impacted and all of your customers' personally identifiable information is now in the hands of a hacker? What will you do about that? If you are a business owner, you need to understand that that's your responsibility and you should have a plan in place and understand, should you audit your site regularly, and what things should you be looking at? Should you be looking at your users and looking at your plugins, and what are those things? Putting together that basic plan of attack. I read some study about, I think AT&T had done it, and they had some statistics about small businesses. They were selling network services, so of course this was all like for sales, but it made sense to me, so that's why I'm going to talk about it. They said that companies that had security practices, proactive security practices like an incident response plan, actually had better sales, because they have that mindset of I want this to continue, and I want my business to be safe, and I want to make sure that I'm doing the right things for my customers. And when you have that mindset, it's going to have a reflection in every aspect of your business. So if you're just like letting security go, how are you managing your sales? How are you managing your customer service? Are you being proactive in those areas as well? So they actually had that study that showed that proactive security practices actually lent itself to a better mindset that helped increase sales and made the business more successful. So, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. It's just that whole idea, if you're paying attention to your business, if you're mindful about what's going on and you know what to do, it's not just security, you're probably mindful in all these other aspects too.
Right.
So I really also like your car analogy, because I remember from a time my first car had no such thing as a check engine light or a low oil now there's tire pressure sensors that there's a bunch of flashes that go off in your dashboard for your car to do what? To communicate a problem that needs addressing.
Right.
And if we apply that sort of idea to WordPress or open source security, we're kind of in that phase where we're not, well, in the past, I don't think it was communicated. I think it was communicated okay, right? Like the WordPress core had communications. They would always talk about security releases, even going back to way forever ago. I forgot how many years ago it was, but it was Matt himself was explaining how to apply a patch. What I mean by apply a patch, it was log into your server, edit this file, change this line to this. And it was that's how security patches used to go. They fixed that, and now most of those things are automated or one click of a button, and you can get your WordPress core, a plugin, or a theme automatically updated, which is
nice?
Frankly, it's a great feature, right? You don't have to take your car into the mechanic; you just hit the button. Actually, I shouldn't say hit the button.
Change the oil.
Yeah, change the oil button. People will get it confused with the turn the oil button light off or the oil light off button.
I had a friend who joked that he would just take, when he had the check engine light, he'd just put black electrician's tape over it, and he's like, good as new. It's not good as new.
I have to admit that some of the check engine lights come on whenever, for some vehicle models, whenever it's just service, you need to go take it in for a service. And I've totally reset those because I'm like, this service is an oil change and you rotate my tires. I can do that reset, but I also didn't rotate the tires. So there's always that give and take. But that idea is that I like it because it's a way to communicate. And that's something that happens in the community more now. And I think I find that a lot more people do it now. And maybe I'm going to use this analogy too. The car tells you if there's a problem and you need to take action. Cars in the past didn't. You could just run out of oil and just keep on driving. And those engines will go for a little bit longer until they don't go anymore. That's it. You burn out the oil, you burn out a piston, you're done for the vehicle. So that's why they added these lights, is to inform the user. So these lights are basically the same thing as getting notifications of you're running an outdated plugin, or even better, you're running an insecure plugin, which I have to drop the little promo here because that's something that Patchstack specifically does with our Patchstack plugin and the Patchstack app. We tell you when you're running an insecure plugin so you can take action. But going back to these analogies, and maybe let's talk about maybe some of your other talks or communities. What would you like to go to?
It might be interesting to talk about community, because I think that's what makes WordPress successful, is the fact that the community is such a welcoming and supportive space. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because I think WordPress is more about the people than it is the software. I mean, the software is great. Software really is empowering and it's wonderful. But I think that the people in the WordPress space are what makes that software really work. There wouldn't be code if somebody wasn't writing it. So I'm all about the people in WordPress.
Yeah, nice. And we're joined, I believe, in the chat with Rob Cairns, who is part of a community that we're both part of, Post Status, where it's a great community for those that can join. I believe there's a fee involved, but it's a great community of WordPress people, professionals, namely professionals. Nobody's running around trying to spam or basically just trying to take or anything like that. It's a lot of people who contribute and give back their time and their expertise to share with one another. So thanks, Rob, for joining us, and thanks, Kathy, well, I really should say thanks, Corey, for
Yeah.
and everybody who set up post status. I don't know everybody's name. I apologize.
There's a
Lindsay as
ton of
well.
people there.
And
Yeah. Lindsay Miller, his wife, is very
Mhm.
active there as well. And Michelle Frechette, who's one of my partners in crime over at Stellar, she's extraordinary. She is a dynamo, and she's very involved in post status as well as I work with her too on WordFest, which is put on by Dan Maybe. Well, it's put on by a bunch of people, but Dan Maybe out in England is one of the people who really started a big orange heart and WordFest, which is committed to the mental health and the well-being of everybody who's a remote worker. Not even just everybody in the WordPress space. It's just remote workers who tend to be a little more isolated. We've got a lot of work to do, and we stay home a lot and work from home and lose connection with people. And so that organization does incredibly great work. So I forgot to put that in my bio to you, but I'm also volunteering there and supporting that organization because I believe so strongly in wellness and mental health. And that organization does great work. So but yeah, Michelle's involved in post status as well as Big Orange Heart and WordFest.
We can go on from there because I think it is important to remember that because we've been dealing with everybody's been dealing with effects of a pandemic over the last few years.
Right.
We can't ignore this. I mentioned it earlier. Communities came together in person before up until 2019. 2020 a little bit with some little asterisks around a few of those towards the end of the year, and it's in 2022 now. We're midway through the year, and it seems to be opening up again. There's been WordCamps and WordPress community. What's interesting is the local WordCamps aren't quite picking up. It's just the big ones. I shouldn't say that. There are a few local ones.
Yeah, there was one in New Jersey, Montclair, I believe. That was a few weeks ago. So
nice.
that's the only real. I think there might have been one out up in the Nordic country somewhere.
Yeah, I think in Europe, there's one was there. But what's great is that it's kind of coming back in a big wave across the world with the major events.
Yeah.
WordCamp Europe was a few months ago. WordCamp USA will be happening in September, a few months from now. And WordCamp Asia, I think this is the first one. I don't know. It might be the second one. I know that WordCamp Asia has had a lot of tribulations and problems related to the pandemic. I think their first one.
So close.
Yes.
They were so close. It was like within a week or two that WordCamp Asia was ready to go, and then everything just started shutting down, and they never got to have it.
Airports are important, especially for these big ones, because I feel like, and again, this may be my perception of it, I think the local communities should be the ones where you go to, right? Like I'm in Colorado. I really shouldn't head out towards New York to go speak in there. I should have a local event, but I don't. If I don't, then it's kind of on me to start talking to people, talking to other WordPress people that are local, finding out if they wanted to help organize an event and get something going. And then there can be a local event. So I don't have to, travel halfway across the states to talk. But then once a year, everybody can come together. Like you could think of it as the best of the best, or kind of like a series, all right, time to go into the big one. So you can go to the main one for your area, Europe, US, Asia, perhaps in the future, South America, perhaps maybe Africa. You're right. Maybe Asia will be open up to Asian Pacific region. That way some WordPress contributors in Australia can come join.
WordCamp Costa Rica. That's the one I wanted to go to. I'm like, habla español. I'm ready. I'm terrible with Spanish because I
probably touched on. I think you touched on to a good idea too. Is there probably should be a few vacation WordCamps that are just in resort areas, saying we're going to come here. Perhaps you'll leave and all of the local businesses will have new WordPress websites, or at least they'll spur the idea of having WordPress websites.
Yeah.
Which maybe is a good way to also spread the good word, the gospel of not WordPress security, but WordPress itself.
Yeah. It's such an empowering software package. I mean, just to be able to, the best thing, my favorite thing about in-person WordCamps is sitting next to somebody and asking them how they use WordPress. And then you hear the best stories, it's everybody from well, I just started my blog and I'm just going to figure this out. Or somebody built a site for me and I want to learn how to do this. And it's there's something just so wonderful that when you start showing them things and they're just like looking at the schedule and I'm not sure what I need to go to. And so then I ask them, well, what is it what are you scared of? What are you trying to learn? And well, I'm going to go to this thing they call Bash and see if it'll help. I'm like, oh no, let's go. How about this one over here about marketing? Don't you want to get more customers and like helping them navigate all, because there's so many different aspects of WordPress, but meeting people where they're at, figuring out what it is that they're trying to do with WordPress, and then helping them connect with the experts and the stories that are going to empower and enliven their businesses and empower them to do more with WordPress. That is my spirit song. That is,
Nice.
that is what I miss the most about going to in-person WordCamps, is just being able to see a new user's eyes light up when they're like, wow, I can do that too. And I just love it.
Yeah, just sharing the experiences and helping,
Yeah.
like it's a mixture of both, right? Like you don't necessarily have to help. You just need to point them in a way that they haven't looked before. And their eyes will open up and they'll be like, I get it now. Like I can see this new thing or this new idea.
Because they don't know until they know, until you can show them, hey, it's like they're hiking in a forest and they don't know, like the most beautiful waterfall in the world is right behind this curve here. You go this way and you'll see it. And it's yeah.
I was going to say, like, you're going to work off that analogy. Like, there's a beautiful waterfall right behind that curve, but right on that curve, there's a big advertisement for a for-pay service that is closed sourced that nobody gets to look at, and they're putting a bunch of money into advertisement to tell you, don't go around this corner. Everything you need to know about this waterfall is right here. And really, in the end, like it's basically based off of the same concepts, right? In the back end, it's a CMS. It's the basic concepts of building and structuring a piece of code, a web application.
Right.
And there's one choice, which is this open, free society, pseudo-free society of people, but they're people that are contributing and helping one another out. If you get into it deep enough, you'll find them and you'll be able to differentiate even the WordPress components that are associated with people that are giving and trying to help out one another's versus those components that are like, they're just there to take their money. Unfortunately, there are a few that exist. We have to deal with them every once in a while because when we report vulnerabilities in their products, they're nowhere to be seen. And when they patch vulnerabilities in the product, they're also nowhere to communicate. They keep all that very much hidden. So, once you learn enough, once you have somebody to show you, like, hey, look at this, right? Like you mentioned, right? You look at the changelog, look at the plugin, look at these factors, and you're going to choose the best plugin based on many factors that you can find out for free by just looking up that information. But it needs somebody to show them. Otherwise, they'll have to learn by trial by error. And
they don't even know where to look, right? They don't even know what's completely possible. And, like they don't know what open source really means. They don't know why it's important that you own your site. They don't know why you don't want to, build your house on somebody else's land. They just don't know. And so I don't know, I guess my appeal to anybody who's watching this that uses WordPress, if you've gained something from open source, if you've gained an experience, if you've made money, if you connected with people around the world who have given to you, you owe it to humanity to give back these like breadcrumbs that show people the way, that show them how you've done it. Because we know that you're going to like find the better waterfalls. You found the one, you're going to find more, you're on your way. Right. But helping a new user who doesn't even know what's possible, helping them find that very first waterfall, that changes humanity, that uplifts humanity. That's what this is all about. This democratizes publishing. It helps people, contribute their voice to the betterment of humanity, because we need everyone's voice to be shared. That's what this is all about, is to be able to give people platforms that can't be taken away so that everybody's voice can be heard, and, let the marketplace of ideas have its way with that, I guess.
Oh, that's wonderful. You're preaching. You're doing great.
I guess
but I should add,
I started at church.
Yeah, but I should add, this is not just a preach, because you have a history of doing exactly what you are preaching. You've gone to WordPress events. You have helped out other people right? You've shared the experience and knowledge you have. You've shared your experience with us and everybody here today. So I thank you very much for doing that. And I love Ven, you said platforms, and it's like, oh, how can somebody get a platform? Well, they can either join communities, talk on the platforms that those communities provide, go to WordPress events. And you know what, if you don't even have any of those things, right? Because I remember a time before WordCamps too, you could start a blog. I think there's some good software out there that you could start a blog with. And I've worked in the security industry a lot, and there are people that have made whole careers out of simply writing a blog every week or every couple of weeks about the information that they found when they encountered a problem. And when you start writing blogs about especially security bugs, it's so tremendously helpful because it shares the information not just for other security researchers. And sometimes people don't like it because they think the bad actors can also get that same information. But it's also that information is freely available for everybody. The developers can learn just the same as everyone else and see exactly what to do. So we're up here close to the top of the hour. I want to thank you again, Kathy. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on?
I will just touch, if I can do it, just like a little plug about Kadence, because Kadence, like I said at the beginning, Kate's changed my relationship with Gutenberg. I could see the power of Gutenberg, but I wasn't like sold. As soon as I started using Kadence, the theme and blocks, I was like, okay, I get it now. I get it now. It was like angels had sung. Kadence is incredibly empowering, and it's what I'm here for. I'm here to empower people with WordPress, and for people to do even more with what WordPress can do. Kadence is giving those kinds of tools to people. Ben Rittner, the founder of Kadence, is a joy to work with and one of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life. I adore him. WordPress needs more Ben. So I'm here to tell the story of what Ben is doing and what Kadence is doing. Kadence is growing by leaps and bounds. It is like a tsunami of new users coming in, and it's so exciting to see what people are doing. It not only empowers people to build great websites, but there's some really interesting people who are building great businesses and great revenue streams off of Kadence. And so I would just implore you to go take a look at what Kadence can do. Try out Kadence blocks. And if you're doing commerce, check out the ShopKit plugin, because that's really amazing too. Just giving you more tools to make WordPress even better. So that's my little plug.
Awesome. Let me extend a little bit. So with Kadence, you're looking for like people who should look towards Kadence. Anybody with a WordPress site, Kadence may have an offering. Like I notice there's a whole bundle of add-ons, blocks, plugins, etc.
Ben does. He's like, oh, well, I need this for what I'm doing. So I'm going to build a plugin that does it. And then I'm going to put it in my bundle so everybody can use it. He's just amazing. And it's just, and I'll say, hey, I think maybe we should do this. And before I even finish the sentence, he's already like programmed something and it's like coming into a service that everybody can use. He's just an amazing individual that's doing incredible work. I'm really excited to be a part of it's a blessing to be a part of this and watch everything that he's doing. He's got all these cool starter templates that help people like not only just build out a theme, but build out a whole site with demo content and demo pages that people can get started with, as well as, if you got like a full bundle, he's got like a reCAPTCHA thing in there. He's so much stuff. It's just kind of nuts, but he's great. And we have a podcast called The Kadence Beat. And a few of those episodes, it's just like I ask him a question and then he just goes and I'm like, yes. As a marketer, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's brilliant. He gives me good content all the time. So it's a really fun product. I am just so excited to be working with this team and watching what they're doing. So go check out Kadence. Kadence Blocks is free. Kadence Theme is free. And actually all of the companies that are creating blocks for Gutenberg and kind of extending what Gutenberg can do, there's this whole movement away from page builders, that lock you in. Like once you choose Elementor as your page builder, you're locked into that page. You can build a whole page with like Generate Process blocks and Kadence blocks and some of the other you can build one page that's got blocks from everybody on there. And so it's really opening up, and I think the future of WordPress is what all of these blocks can do. And so take a look at Kadence, though.
Kadence is kadencewp.com. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Awesome. So it's kadencewp.com. You can go check it out there. If you're any sort of WordPress user, it sounds like it's going to be like you said, the future of WordPress. If you're just curious what it is and what they're doing, and to make sure your website is, up to snuff with the current trends in technology, performance, security. I'm sure all these things are taken into consideration since you're there for sure.
Oh, so fast. Oh yeah, they did one thing that had an upload function. I'm like, well, let me see about this. But they had it all locked down. I was like, oh well, I tried. I couldn't help myself. There's an upload function. What do you mean? What are we uploading?
Yeah, what are we doing here? Yeah, that is great.
They're great.
So awesome.
It's a great team.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time, and thank you everybody else for listening. I'm going to sign off now and hope you all have a wonderful day.